Hello and welcome back to Her Side of the Ruck. I'm Tash
I'm Bernice.
and we're not pundits.
We are just two women who know what a ruck is.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing the dramatics that were the quarterfinals in the United Rugby Championship. We'll also be giving our predictions ahead of the semifinals this weekend, alongside all of our usual segments: red card, yellow card, penalty, rugby confessions, and our moment of the week. So let's get into it. Right, so this weekend in the URC proved to be as much as I thought it was going to be, with the drama, particularly with the final quarterfinal between the Hollywoodbets Sharks and Munster. I think all the other three quarterfinals as well provided ample drama with plenty of talking of points, which we will touch on in the first half of this episode, starting off with Glasgow Warriors versus the DHL Stormers. Bernice, what were your thoughts on that match?
Yeah, I think this match was quite surprising. I did predict the Stormers to win, but not just on that end. I just think overall, I just didn't expect that big of a margin from either
Mm.
side. And then when it was Glasgow, I also just didn't expect that. I think Glasgow came out with a bang. Like we haven't seen them play like that through the entire season, and I was very shocked to see like how strong they came out. And I just thought that their attacking play was so great.
Oh,
So
yeah.
obviously the Stormers lost Sinatla in I think the ninth minute of the match, which was obviously a big loss. They lost their captain to an HIA, I think, which had like a big impact. But also, I just feel like Glasgow capitalized so well on that. They scored 14 points within the time that Sonatla was off with the yellow card. I think Tom Jordan will be a name that will be hunting the Stormers for a very long time. I thought
Oh,
Tom
yes.
Jordan was just insane. So was Sione Tuipulotu. I feel like he's even better now coming from injury. Like it just feels like he he's just getting better and better every time that you see him play. And I think Glasgow also had like something like nine line breaks in the first half,
So
which is
many
just
line breaks.
so many line breaks, and you could just see that the Stormers had to scramble with their defense, and they missed so many first time tackles in the first half. And in the second half, I felt like the Stormers came out a little bit stronger.
Hmm.
They rushed defense. It was more organized. But Glasgow just had them scrambling for their defense, and their defense were way too clustered. Yeah, so the lineouts were a mess. I think the scrums were great for the
Yeah,
Stormers, but
scrums were
their
really good from the
lineouts,
Stormers.
yeah,
Yeah.
scrums very, very good. But lineouts were just all over the place. And at some point in the match, it just felt like was going their way anymore. I think they did lose a few key players throughout the match, but they also were tackled back so many times. Like if you just look at Sasha, like he was tackled back so many times. The X Factor players couldn't really do anything. So Sasha, Warwick Mani. I thought Sinatla was the standout like player
I
in the
agree.
Stormers team. But yeah, it just felt like too individualistic from the Stormers this time around. I don't know what you made of that performance. I know you're probably very, very proud there where you're sitting.
I'll just pick up on a couple of things that you said there. We've not, yeah, as you said, we've not seen that emotion, I think, from Glasgow this season. We saw it a couple of times last season, particularly when they played the Bulls on their South African tour, were losing, but came back and got those two losing bonus points in the final 10 minutes. You saw that emotion and resilience, and we saw that on the pitch at Scotstoun on Friday night. They were so up for it. I forgot how many guys are leaving and going on to different clubs. You mentioned Tom Jordan. He's going to Bristol Bears. I mean, Bristol have offered him a lot of money. I think it's something within the range of, well, it's definitely a six-figure contract, which I don't think the SRU could pay for. But yeah, he was awesome. And as you say, will haunt them. Sione Tuipulotu, if he doesn't start for the Lions, like on the tour, I will be amazed because he's hunting for it, which I think is very different to how we've seen some of the Leinster players play against the Scarlets who have been selected. They seem a bit more worried about, they don't want to pick up an injury ahead of the Lions tour compared to Sione, who's just all for it. That little kick through the gap to Kyle Rowe, setting up Rowe to score, was a moment of magic. It was absolute brilliance. So, and you don't really see that often from Sione. You see him carry hard, run hard, tackle hard, make great line breaks, score great tries, but you don't often see him do the kicking game as much. But that was a moment that that made the highlight reel, Glasgow's highlight reel and the URC's highlight reel. That's for sure. It was amazing. George Horn, I said it, I called it. He always gets on the end of tries. There's a reason he's the club's top try scorer. I mean, he gets set up by a great team. And as you said, it comes from all the great line breaks. It comes from the drills that they've practiced on the field. They know exactly where the bounce is going to be. It helped with the conditions, fairly mild for the west of Scotland on a Friday night. If it was blowing all over the place, I don't think it would have been as high a scoring game. But yes, some moments of magic. I also have to give a shout out to Rory Darge. I think a lot of people in Scottish rugby thought that he deserved to get a Lions call up, and he does. But he's still very young, and there's still potential for him to get called up. But you don't often see him crack a smile. And I think it was after the first or second try you saw him crack a smile. So that was really good to see. And yeah, Josh Mackay as well, the fullback. Normally you just see a lot of, he's great under the high ball, great pace. Like as soon as he puts the gas on, he's gone. But we saw him as a great distributor against the Stormers. So Glasgow were the much better side. They were emotionally in it, but they didn't let the emotion kind of overpower some of the other stuff. I've often found when I've watched them play Edinburgh in the 1872 Cup, the emotion sometimes overtakes the skill. But against the Stormers, there was just enough emotion to get the win from a Glasgow end. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. If they can carry that on against Leinster, I have them to win. I have them to win and play in the final, which I hope is the outcome. But great game. Guys, anyone watching this, if you have thoughts on that first quarter final, please let us know in the comments as always. Let's move on to talking about the Vodacom Bulls versus Edinburgh. Bernice, you were at Loftus at the weekend. What was the mood like?
Yeah, the vibes were high. I think most of the Bulls supporters had very high hopes as well for the match, and everyone called a Bulls win. We have spoken about it in the previous podcast where people called it by quite a big margin, and
Hmm.
both of us said like we just can't see that happening. And I think Edinburgh came out with a bang. They were so good in the Bulls' 22 in the first half. Like every time they got there, they converted
Yeah.
and they got points. So they were so good in the first half. I just think when come the second half, the three tries that the Bulls scored after the second half started, like that just killed Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Although they stayed in the fight the whole match, I just think it was just a bit like too much for them. You can't really, it's difficult to come back from something like that. And
Mm.
every time they had a chance in the Bulls' 22, it wasn't like the first half where when they got there, they would convert. So every time something happened, the Bulls will get over the ball or scrum and then lose the ball.
Mm.
So, yeah, disappointing, I think, for Edinburgh because they stayed in the fight the whole match, especially leading the scoreboard in the first half and then, yeah, not coming out on top. But massive credit to the Bulls. I think they were just clinical enough to pull it through. And I think Billy LaRue, like man of the match performance, I think
Mm.
he was like his old self. There's a lot of controversy around Billy. Is he maybe at an age where you should think about retirement, etc. But I think his performance over the weekend, like, just proved that he still has it in him. I think
Mm.
Wes Goosen was amazing for Edinburgh. He did so well, as well as Darcy Graham.
Mm.
Just the usual performance from him. Yeah, what did you make of that, Tash?
I thought LaRue played with so much confidence. And again,
Yeah.
it was enough confidence just so it felt like natural. It was like muscle memory powered him
Mm,
through all of those years of drills, playing on the field, all of that match experience. It all just kind of came together. And Bulls had some awesome line breaks at the top of the second half. And as you said, it kind of crushed Edinburgh, even as you said, they stayed in the fight. For me, Ross Thompson was Edinburgh's player of the match. I thought his kicking was excellent and calm, collected, really good playmaker. And whilst he was at Glasgow last year and he didn't get, because we had loads of fly halves at the Warriors, there weren't many opportunities for him to start, and I don't think he played. I think he played against the Stormers in the quarterfinal last year, but he didn't play in any more after that. So for him to consistently get the starting 10 at Edinburgh, I think has been great for his career, and it's been great to see how he's flourished with that 10 jersey. And you can see the experience is coming through. But yeah, for me, his kicking game was awesome and yeah, calm, composed. Edinburgh are unlucky, but it just goes to show if you leave a couple of gaps in the
Mm.
line, any team that is in the top of the URC is going to punish you for it. And the Bulls are a clear example of how they did that. They were just ruthless and clinical, but electric as well. The speed, as soon as they got that first line break, boom, try. And you've got the supporting players. It's not just one player going out on their own, which you've seen with other teams, like a great break by a winger, but they get stopped 5, 10 meters short because they haven't got any support, and you've got 2 to 3 defenders stopping the winger from getting to the try area. But with Bulls, you had 2 to 3 players coming up in support. They're looking dangerous and they look very determined ahead of the semi-finals next weekend. Right, moving on to Leinster Scarlets, which in my opinion was probably the most underwhelming of the 4 quarters. Not surprised that Leinster got the win. Unlucky to Scarlets. Tough one, really, given it's their first top 8 finish. Welsh rugby's not been in a great place for the past few years, but they scored a lovely try, a beautiful try on the 40th minute before the end of the first half. And I think that made a lot of Leinster fans very nervous.
Yeah, I agree. And I saw that some of the rugby pages called Leinster to win by a massive margin. I think
Yeah,
some of them said like Leinster by 34. And I was quite shocked, like seeing how well Scarlet had been performing throughout the season. And I know
yeah.
it's Leinster and we all know the side that Leinster has and the team that they have, but I was still shocked. I know Scarlet's history and the Welsh team's history. But I was very shocked, and I think both of us called like a pretty close, not a close match, but Windsor to win comfortably, but closer margin.
Yeah, it wasn't
And
more than 2 converted tries that we predicted.
yes, and that's exactly what ended up happening. And
Mm.
yeah, I have to say I wasn't surprised. I think Scarlets were unlucky, but they can really tap themselves on the back for making the top 8 and also up a performance that they had. So.
Scarlett should be really proud, and I think Welsh Rugby should be really proud of their performance. They've got a lot to take away from it, and I think they could be really dangerous ahead of next year. They've got a lot of experience in their players, and getting to a quarterfinal and playing at the Aviva is difficult. Like it is just hard. It's hard for any team in whatever league,
Yeah.
but I'm not surprised that Leinster won. I was doing a lot of research on the interwebby thing, and particularly on TikTok, and I've seen a lot of different creators based out in Ireland have said that Leinster don't look like they want to play for their coach anymore.
Mm.
Slash, they are worried about injuries for the Lions, as I said a bit earlier on in the show. And I can see that because the majority of the Lions squad is Leinster rugby for a good reason, because their calibre and talent is fantastic. But if you get a little niggle in a semi final or a final, so close to when you have that first test match in Dublin before they go down to the Southern Hemisphere and then play the Wallabies, that could rule you out and means you don't get capped. But on the opposite end, you've got people like Siri Tuipulotu who have just thrown themselves into
Yeah.
it. So being worried about injury ahead of the lines is not an excuse to perform for your club. It's the final trophy of the year. Like if you don't win this trophy this year, you've got to wait all of next year to get another one. Now, my alternative perspective would be, are Leinster holding back the emotion to bring it in the semis and the finals? Because they know they kind of pummel teams in the quarters, whether it's Europe or in the league in the URC, and they kind of exert loads of emotion. They get involved with conversations in the media that then takes their mind away from what's actually going to happen in the semi-finals and the finals, because teams step it up and teams get better. We saw it with Glasgow in the quarterfinals this year. We saw it with them last year. We saw it with the Bulls last year as well. So, okay, yeah, Leinster and Glasgow will be facing each other in the semi-finals this year, but ultimately you're going to be playing a South African team. Whether if it's Leinster, if they win, they'll be playing at home, but South Africa teams will bring it, whether that be the Bulls or the Sharks. And the
Mm.
physicality is always there. And I think both Bulls and Sharks are better in the scrum at the minute. I
Mm.
just think South Africa produces like it's just insane how much competition there is in the forwards, whether it's a South African club team or a Springboks jersey. It's just there's just so much depth. I think there has to be, again, questions. We say this every week, but you look at them and you think like, what's actually happening here? It's almost like a mystery. I think sometimes talking about Leinster, but you want to see them do well. Well, for me next week, I want Glasgow to do well, but I also want a competitive game. I thought Prendergast had a fairly decent game from what I saw of the highlights, but I know people will disagree on that. For me, James Lowe is always consistent. I will have him score him a try, at least one try against Glasgow next weekend. The crowd, there was only like 12,000 people at the Aviva at
Mhm.
the weekend. Now, a lot of people did say that was because there were some public transport issues in Ireland. I'm not sure to the extent of that.
Mhm.
That could have been a thing why the players weren't as hyped up as when you
Mhm.
compare the atmosphere at Scotstoun to Loftus to the Shark Tank. The atmospheres were completely different compared to the Aviva. Interesting to see what Leinster will do against Glasgow in the semis. Okay, moving on to the most dramatic quarterfinal, probably the most dramatic quarterfinal of URC history. Let's be real. And I know if you haven't seen our socials, Bernice posted a reaction video of her watching the Sharks v Munster at the weekend. And I don't think we called it that it was going to be tight, but
Mm.
we did not think that it was going to go to kicks at the end.
And then there was extra time. Like
No.
that I feel like as a rugby fan, that is the type of matches you just love. Like it had everything
Mm.
in the match,
Hmm.
like physicality, it had entertainment, like extra time. Yeah, I'm sure that Munster and Sharks fans would disagree in that moment that you were watching the game, but it just
Hmm.
like it was just such a good match to watch. I think I want to start with Ethan Hooker. Like, give that man a Springbok jersey. He is just so good week in and week out, and I would just love to see him in a Springbok jersey. But I just think he is so good, and you could see his individual brilliance in the match on Saturday. The start to the match was it was almost like you're watching a repeat of the last four matches of the Sharks.
Mm.
There were a lot of errors and a lot of mistakes. So it felt like a repeat of the previous matches of the Sharks. But I felt like there were moments in the match that you feel like, okay, no, we're still in this. We just need some things to click and it could go the Sharks' way. I felt like I want to also give credit to Oxenshare. He was just like such a hard worker on the field, like with tackling, with the carries that he made. I know that the backline players always get the most recognition, but I just think Ox deserves it. Even though the scrummaging was just as good as always, I just think like he worked so hard on the field on Saturday. Jack Crawley and Craig Casey were also standout players for
Mm.
Munster. Like their kicks were just pinpoint accurate. And when it came to like the penalty shootout, I was like, oh my goodness, no, because they have Jack Crawley, they have Conor Murray, like they just have such good kickers. Yeah, but just throughout the match, they were so good. And I thought Conor Murray replacing Craig Casey was just as good. His
Mm.
kicks were brilliant. And yeah, he was just very good overall. I also just want to give like massive credit to Munster. They did stay in the fight the whole match. They made
Absolutely.
it very difficult for the Sharks. Like, you can't deny that Munster made it very difficult for the Sharks. They stopped the Sharks' rolling maul twice. So yeah, defensively they were also very good.
Even when Sharks were dominating Munster in the scrum in the extra 20 minutes of extra time. And the reason they go into extra time is because they were both on 24 points.
Yeah.
So that is the rule in the URC knockout. So if you're on the same level of points, you then go into one half of 10 minutes of extra time, have a break, and then another 10 minutes. And then after that, which is the scenario that happened at the weekend, if you have the same number of points and the same number of tries scored, that's when you go to the kicks, which is why it was so dramatic. And for a neutral watching, as you said, Bernice, just an amazing game of rugby. But Sharks were so dominant in the scrum against Munster, but Munster's defence, particularly 5 metres out, like Sharks made some insane line breaks, and you just thought, this is when they're going to score, this is when they're going to score,
Yeah.
game's going to be over. But Munster kept them out, an absolute testament to their physicality, their guts and their drive, because your body is battered by that point.
Yeah.
You've played 80 minutes of intense, nearly test level rugby in a country where you haven't got a lot of supporters either. Like I didn't see many Munster supporters in the crowd.
No.
It's a long journey to make from the Northern Hemisphere to the Southern Hemisphere for a quarter final and not guarantee that your team's going to win. So credit to Munster, like how physical they were in keeping Sharks out. But I think tiring everyone out in the scrum, the Sharks were just dominant when it came to the scrum. And I think that is where they could trip up the Bulls at the weekend, even though their bodies are battered. But they will have fantastic members of staff that will help them in the recovery and the training leading up to the semi final at the weekend. But Jack Crowley for me, cool, calm, collected. He's got the starting Irish jersey for me over Prendergast. And again, I've engaged with a couple of other people's commentary on TikTok, particularly saying that Prendergast is great, but Jack Crowley has more experience. He's more calm under pressure. He's had a few more years. Like he was the fly half when Munster won the URC 2 years ago. He's been the number 10 for Ireland, and he's just, I don't know, can almost take a deep breath and calm himself, even when there was, I guess, the controversy that happened during the penalty shootout. We're not going to discuss that too much because we know that everyone will have their opinions. But if you do have any opinions, let us know. We want to hear them. But he kept it cool. And that is the testament to someone who is experienced, but also a great professional. So, regardless of what the distractions are, you can have someone screaming and shouting in the stands or booing you. And if you can slot the kick, then you are a class act. But Sharks, they snatched it at the end, and it comes down to fine margins. And that's what defines knockout rugby. And I thought we were going to end this weekend on a high. And we did. We ended it on high drama. I'm sure you're very happy as well from the results.
Very happy and very relieved.
I can imagine what your heart was probably in the red zone for about the 120 minutes of broadcast footage of this time. So yeah, emotions are high in fans and probably the players as well. But it means that there is a South African derby in the semi-final, as well as two Celtic nations fighting it out for a place in the grand final. So let's quickly preview those two semi-finals. We have Leinster Rugby versus Glasgow Warriors, which is I suppose, a repeat of the quarterfinal in the Investec Champions Cup this year. And then we also have the Bulls versus the Sharks in the South African derby, which is a repeat of the Currie Cup semi-final, if I'm correct, Bernice.
Yeah, definitely correct.
And you're going to be there at Loftus.
Yeah, we will be watching. My heart will be racing, and yeah, so we will be cheering from the stands. But yeah, very excited for that match. There are a lot of evenly matched matchups between the Sharks as well as the Bulls. I am backing the Sharks to take the win. I think Sharks by 3. So I think it's still going to be a close game. Let's hope no extra time this time around. Like, please, no, no, no. Let's
Your
not
heart
do
can't
that
take
again.
it.
No, no, please. So yeah, so hoping for no extra time, hoping for a result at least like at the end of the 80th minute. But I think it's a very evenly matched game. The only thing that is worrying me a little bit is the 110 minutes that the Sharks played. There's no recovery time in between except your usual like 1 week turnaround. I do think the conditioning coaches and everyone will work as hard as possible to get the team ready in time to recover. But still, it takes a toll on you. You're also in such like emotionally on a very high after such a game. Now you have to
Mm.
regroup, mentally shift your focus to the semi-final and not kind of get caught up in those emotions. So I think it's going to be a very interesting game. Like I said, I am backing the Sharks, but I think this is also going to be a very, very tight one as usual.
I think it will be a tight one as well. I have the Bulls to win it, but by 3. The Bulls have got something to prove, and they showed that against Edinburgh when they were down with that points margin with 31 minutes in and then turn it around and like that in the second half. They're determined to win. They don't want to be shown up at home. And a couple of teams have done that to them in the past 9 to 12 months. You had Northampton Saints do it to them in the qualifying rounds of the Investec Champions Cup. you also had Glasgow do it to them in the final last year. And I know some of the Vox Pops you did when what was your moment that you could undo in rugby history, and you have a lot of Bulls fans going, yeah, that
Yeah.
defeat to Glasgow because there was silence. And when I was watching, I was in the pub. Everyone was screaming and shouting. It was great on the fan zone in Glasgow, but you could see the atmosphere in Loftus had just like died
Yeah.
because everyone was just gutted. And fair enough, you put a lot of emotions on the line, your heart's out there, and then your team don't win by 5 points, which is really quite a small margin in a final or a knockout rugby. Not as bad as going to extra time and then kicks, like the quarter final between Sharks and Munster, but it's still a lot on the line, particularly when Bulls were so close to scoring in that final minute and a half, and Glasgow could have lost the championship. So I do think it will be close, but I do think Bulls will take the win purely because they haven't had to go through the emotional turmoil that the Sharks have gone through. You saw it with Leinster, where they do really well in quarterfinals and the emotions there, but then the other team step up and control the emotion better in the semis and the finals, and then they lose. I do think the Bulls will have it, and also their bodies haven't been as battered by the Sharks, but it could go either way. Leinster, Glasgow. Back in my team, Glasgow to win by 2. George Horn with a try and James Lowe with a try for Leinster, because James Lowe just always scores. He scores for Ireland, he scores for Leinster, and if anything, he's one of Leinster's most consistent performers, and rightly so. He's got experience, he's got confidence, he's got great skill. If Glasgow can keep Leinster out, handle the blitz defence, and keep their defence line strong and manipulate the gaps when they come up with those attacking phases, I think they'll take the win. When they got nilled in the quarterfinals of the Investec Champions Cup, that was a very tough one to take. But I know what's going to be happening in the camp. They will learn a lot of lessons from that. They'll take it as a positive thing and move on and be better. But also, they had quite a young team when they went to when they played to Leinster last. As this time, if I know Hugh Jones is out with an injury, but even like Tuipulotu, Stafford McDowell link up in the centres is still an incredible combination. So if you can put your big playmakers out, the ones that have the experience, the ones that played in the final last year, I think they'll take it. But Leinster fans will probably say I'm wrong.
I definitely think I agree with you on the try of George Horn. Like he'll definitely score a try. And I also have Carl Rowe to score a try.
Mm.
I just think he was brilliant against the Stormers. And I am backing Glasgow to win as well. I'm backing Glasgow by 5. So it's still also a close game. But I think if Glasgow play the rugby that they played against the Stormers, Leinster is going to have a very hard time. Leinster has been quite good, like in the league matches against team. Like they demolish them. And I
Mm.
think you've mentioned it as well. But there's something also like off. And I know we're saying it like week in and week out, there's a few things that we need answers to. It just feels to me like there's just something not there. And I might be wrong. Maybe we still like will see Leinster winning this whole thing. Maybe it's this year. I just can't see if Glasgow plays like they did last week. I just can't see them losing this match. And I think we also just need to remember that Glasgow is the defending champs. So they will still have something to prove and something to play for. I feel like when you said you're seeing a lot of emotion from them, hopefully they play with the same emotion in the semis and they can absorb it as well as they did in the quarters.
Absolutely. Glasgow are the only team in the semi-finals to have won the URC before. Can they do the double? Can they go back to back? No one's done it before. We will find out at the weekend. That is the end of the first half of this episode. We're going to take a brief break and then we'll be back. Hello and welcome back to Her Side of the Ruck. We're now moving on to our weekly segments of Rugby Confessions, Red Card, Yellow Card Penalty, and our Moment of the Week. But we're starting off with Rugby Confessions, and we were submitted a very interesting confession. It was actually just a comment on one of our videos, which I'm going to read out for you now. They should be able to swap refs if the original one isn't doing their job properly. Side eye. It's an interesting one because if you think about if a player's having a bad match, right, they'll get subbed off And that's why you normally have a 5-3 or a 6-2 split bench. Because if one of the backs is having a pretty bad day or his kicking's not great, then you can sub him off for a different back later on in the match. But with refs, you don't have a ref bench.
I would be very curious to know like what the criteria would be for a ref to be subbed. So I thought that was so funny when we got the confession, and I thought like actually like very valid question. But I would be very interested to know like what the criteria would be for that to happen. So as you've mentioned, like when a player has a bad match, they get subbed, or when there's an injury, or when they need to go off for an HIA. Those are all things that should happen before a player can get subbed. But for a ref, like what would the criteria be? There are certain decisions that are made in a match that we can go like, oh, that was bad. But myself, my mom, and my dad can sit together, and all three of us can be like, all three of us can have different opinions on what
Hmm.
the call should be
Mhm.
eventually. So what would the criteria be? Because I've always had this thing in my head where I always thought that ref should also be ranked according to a system. So you get like red, which is your very like poor decision. So it was like a costly decision. So it either cost the team a match or a trophy or whatever, or a card that ended up being very costly in the match. Then you have like your yellow, which is like it's not it wasn't the right decision. So like it was called forward when it like knocked forward when it shouldn't have been called forward or something like that, but it didn't really have an impact on the outcome of the match. And then you have your green, which is like good decisions. And then obviously each of them has like, so say like the red is 5 points and the yellow two and the green one, whatever. And then it adds up. So I think something like that would have actually been very helpful for like the sub. So then like in the match, you can be like, okay, like that's not right or whatever. But I do think it would be quite a difficult thing to call. What do you think?
I think the comment is fair enough because not every ref is gonna be perfect, and how complicated rugby union law is. If every law was interpreted perfectly, there would be so many stoppages, so many, and people already complain that rugby union is slow, which I have said it's not. I don't think it is, but if you were stopping a bit like American football. As a Brit watching American football, I get very confused why they stop every 5 seconds. And I understand why events like the Super Bowl have loads of dancing and music because you need it within all of the stoppages. As rugby, if rugby had that, I think it would lose a lot of its engagement. My pushback would be to having a sub for a ref is all refs have a certain style of refereeing. They all bring their own touch to it. So for me, I always think of Luke Pearce bringing his own touch. He doesn't really like to stop things and he wants play to continue. But equally, he takes no BS. So if there's any chat back from any players in an opposite team, he immediately walks 10 metres down the field to give a penalty further up to the team that won the penalty. Other refs don't do that. Other refs are a lot more patient and say, right, look, no, this is your third infringement, you need to watch out, otherwise someone's going to the bin. So each ref has their own different style, and it's not like a team in a formation where they've practiced. So if your fly half goes off for a different fly half, you've worked out how the combination changes with a different style of player. As with a ref, each ref is so unique and individual, and they don't operate in the same team setting that teams do, that a sub bench wouldn't work, and also that would just cost the league so much more money. But I thought this confession was really funny. We have our opinions on it, but I think logistically it wouldn't work. But I think it's a nice idea to entertain, but not financially a practical one. But thank you for that confession. If you have any thoughts about this week's rugby confession, please let us know. hersideoftheruck@gmail.com. Right, moving on to the judging chamber of Bernice and Tash with red card, yellow card, penalty. Bernice, what is our decision in the world of rugby that we are making a ruling on today?
So today, because we already spoke about the referee, our judgment is made on fans arriving late to a match. I think we just need to take a deep breath before we give our verdict. So I'm going to be very short and sweet with this one. Red card, no mitigation. I just think be better. Like plan. better. Like, please don't arrive late to a match. Now it's the anthem, or it's like just before kickoff, or it's during a very hectic moment in the match, or it's a very tense moment in the match. Now you want to squeeze your past, and I'm trying to see what's happening on the field. It's just a mess. It's dangerous play. Now I can't see. Now you might be spilling your beer. Like, there's just too much going on. Red card. There's no like, and with a heavy suspension as well.
Wow, that is a brutal ruling. I might join you in the rule of brutal rulings as well because I don't really like tardiness generally in life. If I'm tardy, I feel really bad, and it's normally because I've taken too much on my plate, or in the UK, my trains got cancelled, and I know you said in South Africa there's not as much public transport as there is in the UK, but if you're not from the United Kingdom, public transport is very, particularly in England, is incredibly temperamental. Sometimes the train operators decide that they just don't want to work one day, or they put on two carriages when they know they're going to have 25,000 people going to a stadium in the middle of a city centre, as long alongside the rest of the general public. So that for me, red could be lowered to a yellow. There could be mitigation, but I'm the same. Anthems, I people trying to squeeze past me with their, as you say, with their beer spilling everywhere or they're tripping over, and it frustrates me. And you can't see, or particularly if I know sometimes I go to matches and I am enjoying the atmosphere, but I'm also capturing content because that is a space that I operate in. I want to be able to show my love for rugby through all of my channels and stuff. And if I've got someone's head in the way, I'm like, well, you've just ruined it. You have ruined it. So, yes, be better. Red card, but it might be lowered to a bunker for me. Heard it here, folks. We do not like tardiness at matches. Do better. My other thing would be maybe on an operations end for clubs, encourage people to go to their seats within 10 minutes. Don't keep them waiting, and like transfer the entertainment onto the pitch rather than keeping entertainment around the stadium, outside the stadium. So it
Mhm.
encourages everyone to take their seats 10 to 15 minutes early. But unfortunately, even though we'll be having meetings and we'll be given 6 week bans for lateness, people will still turn up late and they will not learn
Yeah.
from those meetings. Red card for both of us. I'm a little bit less harsh. You are red through and through. Okay, and finally, moving on to our moment of the week. We chose two South African coaches enjoying each other's time over a braai. Bernice, can you please explain for people who are not South African watching our pod what a braai is?
Braai can get very, like, if you want to elaborate on it, it can get very philosophical because for South Africans, a braai is like a big thing. But in short, a braai is where you have a get together around a variety of meat and brandy. So, Tash, I don't know if you know what brandy is, or if you have been introduced to brandy by the Glasgow Warriors Sapphires. But if you ever come to South Africa, that is what you need to know. You need to have
Okay.
good people. You need to have a fire lit. South Africans have a big debate around charcoal or wood. Most South Africans would tell you no, you need to use wood for your meat and your fire. So that is also an ongoing debate. So let's say wood and a nice fire. And it starts early, like if
Mm,
I invite you to a braai over and it starts, and I tell you, okay, it starts at 5. We're not eating at 6. Like we we're getting together, we're chatting, we're potting, and then you'll have your dinner at like 9. So then the
yeah.
meat will be fried and everyone will be done um having their chats. And in South Africa we call it a kuier. Like kuier is the
I've got a meat eater. We're talking about meat, and I've got a meat eater joining me, my cat bear. Hello. Please
he
carry on,
wants to
Bernice.
go. He's
He wants
like,
to hear all
I,
about
I,
the meat.
I want in. Um,
You know, exactly.
so yeah, so in South Africa, so I don't know if you want to try and pronounce it, but kuier.
Oh, I can't roll my R's. Kale.
That's
I
good.
wasn't very
I love
good.
it.
It wasn't very
No,
good.
no, that's not bad at all. So that is like the proper term for like a get together in
Mm,
Afrikaans. But yeah, and then alongside that, you have your choice of percentage beverage. And in South Africa, the choice is usually brandy and Coke. So, guys, we need to get Tash to South Africa. Tash needs to experience these things so that she can know what the hype is about. But so to get to the point of it all, so Jack White's inviting Sean Everett for a braai is a big thing. You know,
mm,
it's different when you invite someone for a braai than when you would invite them to a restaurant to have dinner. It's personal, you know that people like actually sit down and have conversations around a braai. So it's a big thing in South Africa. So if you invite someone to a braai, it's personal and you know you're gonna have great chats with that person.
mm. And it's a testament to the culture of rugby, as we always say each week on the pod, and that's really what shapes our decisions of choosing moment of the week for us, because it doesn't just highlight the talent and the physicality and the mental work that goes into being a great coach or a great player or a great person that works for a rugby club, but it's just the community outside of it. And it's really touching to see that, particularly ahead of a knockout rugby match. But you're a South African wherever you go, aren't you? Whether you've been up to Scotland and you come back, or whether you're a South African living somewhere else, whether you're a Safa that's never left. So I did hear a lot about Bryce from the Safas at Glasgow. They usually joint forces with the RGs, so the Argentinians, because they
Mhm.
loved their large cuts of meat. So
Yeah.
I saw some of the photos from their barbecues and I was like, well, yeah, fair enough, because you weigh about 120 kilos, so, and you're mostly muscle, so fair. But yeah, we chose that as our moment of the week. We thought it was really touching and also a real great nod to South African culture. Well, that is the end of episode 3. We will be watching the semi-finals this weekend to decide who is going off to the grand final. Are we going to have a new champion going into the final, or are we going to have the double winners of Glasgow Warriors? We will find out in the next 2 weeks. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Signing off here, Tash in the UK.
Signing off, Bernice in South Africa.
Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. See you again next time. Bye.
Bye.